Welcome to another episode of Planet Possible. We're delighted that you're joining us to hear evidence-led discussion about topics that are critical to the way we manage our water, nature and climate. A huge thanks to our sponsors, BMA, Arup and MWH Treatment, and you'll hear a little more about them later. We're really grateful for their support in bringing the podcast to you. If you're new to Planet Possible, I'm Niki Roach, an enthusiastic connector of people and ideas and a fellow of SIWEM, the Chartered Institution of Water and Environmental Management. How the water sector operates in the UK, sewage spills in rivers and the sea, the ownership structures and financial models of UK water companies, water reform, views of campaigners, views of people who work in the sector. All of these have been at the forefront of media attention and public opinion in the last few years. There are strong and sometimes opposing views everywhere. Recently, Channel 4 broadcast a docudrama called Dirty Business, all about these issues. And we thought it would be interesting and useful to get a reaction to the programme from a senior figure within a water company. Lizzie Frost from Anglian Water kindly agreed to come on. It's a tough subject, so we really appreciate her willingness to contribute. Before we get her reaction to the programme, let's hear the audio of the trailer from the Channel 4 docudrama Dirty Business.
You think that's poo? Of course it's not poo. Wash it off, scrub it.
In the year that I have data for, they've dumped sewage 1,000 times.
Get the doctor in.
We can't treat sewage without any power. We're dumping it straight into the river.
We've got to get this to the Environment Agency.
We want to strip out as much unnecessary regulation as possible.
You want water companies to monitor their own pollution.
These aren't accidents. It's a policy.
Close the beach.
There is no evidence.
All we ever do is give you the evidence. Nothing ever happens.
You're polluting our water.
1,100 criminal offences a day.
You should be ashamed of yourself. Not one water company executive has ever been prosecuted.
We do not trust you.
I'm delighted to be joined by Lizzie Frost, Head of Catchment Flow Compliance at Anglian Water. So Lizzie, a very warm welcome to Planet Possible.
Thanks, Niki. It's lovely to be here.
So for people who haven't watched Dirty Business, can you give us a bit of a summary of some of the themes that were raised in the programme, Lizzie?
Dirty Business aired over 3 episodes. Essentially, it was a dramatisation of the real-life drama that has surrounded our industry over the past 5 or so years, all around like environmental harm, spills, pollutions, and our customers and communities, rightly so, saying that this is no longer acceptable and that we need to change and invest in protecting environments and societies that we operate in and that we serve. Being in the water sector, we all watched it avidly. I have to admit, watching it more than once, taking on board all of the points and balancing sort of my own emotions of somebody that works in the water sector and cares passionately about improved river and coastal health with what was being portrayed in that drama.
We obviously both work in the water sector and I found it a really difficult watch. What were some of your initial reflections after watching it?
The first episode, within about the first 20 minutes, I felt really angry. I felt it was a really unfair portrayal of people who work in a sector who are passionate about the environment and customers and providing clean water and taking away dirty water. And actually, I had to pause it. I had to go and take myself, walk around the block, get myself in the right objective frame of mind and watch it. Initially, like a lot of people that I work with, it felt quite personal. You know, we turn up to work to care for the environment, to improve river and coastal health, to look after the communities that we serve and we operate within, and to do good stuff. And it's always hard, isn't it, when you hear storytelling that goes against that. So that was like my emotional reaction. My rational head quickly kicked in, really. Where I got to was, I'm not sure it told us anything that we didn't already know. It adds fuel to a fire, but that really is no different to how it's felt for a little while now. And actually, you know, when I see Anglian Water and the energy and the efforts that they are putting into it and the people that care deeply and the energy and intensity that goes into learning when it doesn't go well, it gives me good faith that we are on the right path and we are making the investments and we are making interventions that will make it better. But clearly, I had an old boss that once told me that, you know, Rome wasn't built in a day, but bits of it were. And so, we're having to go on a bit of a journey to be able to get there and deliver all the things that we want to achieve.
One of the things that I found interesting was watching it with a slightly inside lens. I've not spent my entire career in the wastewater bit of the business, but that's where I live and work now, and understanding some of that, yeah, that's right, and some of that you think, I think that's the drama bit of the docudrama. From your perspective, what were some of the big things that they got right and maybe got wrong?
I find it hard when we start to talk about right and wrong, because that's quite black and white, isn't it? And that's like a personal perspective. So I think it's what messages did I hear loud and clear out of what they were talking about, which is sewage in the environment is now unacceptable. Customers, communities, Surfers Against Sewage, Virgil Sharkey, all of those vocal campaigners, they're all supportive, I guess, of our ambitions to have zero spills, that our assets are, reliable and supportive of that. I could hear loud and clear that it was water companies, but if you have spilled, just tell us so we don't get in the water. We will still campaign when you have done it and we still don't like it, but please be transparent with us on when it has happened. When you look at our waterways and you look at sort of the reasons for them not being at a good status, water companies are only one part of the picture. You've got highways and you've got agriculture, as other big contributors to rivers not being at a good status. It feels quite one-sided in terms of the argument. It's it's all about the water companies. They're the only people that are making these water courses and coastal areas filthy. And actually, it's not. And the more I see about it, the more passionate I become around it's going to take more than the water companies to fix the problem. But equally, that's not there as a deflecting, it's not just me, it's them over there too. So actually, the best thing you can do is get your own house in order.
I think that's a really important point, because even if the water sector were perfect, river health wouldn't be if nobody else did stuff. And I think that, for me, I think what you said is that's the important thing, which is that if public expectation is that as long as the water companies sort stuff out, everything will be fine, there would be an improvement. There's no getting away from that. But as you say, there are other sources going in that are quite significant. And so there's something about, I think, public expectation realising that, which is that everyone's got to clean their act up, if you like. Otherwise, we will still have rivers that have high levels of nitrogen and phosphorus and road runoff in them that you probably still won't want to swim in if that's something that you choose to do. And also that they are rivers, they're not swimming pools. So there's that balance of, we absolutely want clean, healthy waterways, but we also have to be mindful of the fact that they're not treated to the same standard as you would throw your kids in on a Saturday morning. So it's that balance, isn't it, of just recognising, helping the public understand that, I think.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? So my dad is my biggest supporter and my biggest critic all in one. And, having worked in the water sector for a good number of years now, he is often curious in terms of, when Severn Trent's old CEO, Liv Garfield, her pay is in the Radio 4 Today programme, and that gets discussed, the financial position of Thames. He's really curious about what's going on with that. And then Dirty Business was no different. And round the family dinner table, one Sunday afternoon, those dirty water companies making all those rivers dirty. But actually, when you dig beneath the surface, you sort of go, well, Dad, who owns the rivers? And he's like, well, the water companies own the rivers. And you're like, no, the Environment Agency owns the rivers. And you actually start to explore what are contributors to poor river health. Well, the water companies being one, but farmers and agriculture and fertilisers and field runoff being another. Highways, big contributor. Fire engines putting out roadside fires. Well, the chemicals that they use to do that just goes down the drains, and that surface runoff straight out to the environment. And actually, when you start to look at how highways and the Environment Agency are all kind of governed and overseen, actually, for me, that's why sometimes the water companies can be easier pickings and, take a lot of that media spotlight. And I love the fact that all the water companies are signed up to the Get River Positive. Collectively, there is a huge amount of energy in the sector to do the right thing, to change that rhetoric, really, and to demonstrate that, we can do it. Being in a water company, we know we can do it, because 12, 14 years ago, customers told us that it was unacceptable to have their supply interrupted. Previously, regulations kind of said it's not great, but, the measure was around customers going without water for 6 hours or more. So it sort of unintentionally made a supply interruption an okay event. actually what's happening in the world of spills and pollutions and sewage in the environment, it is the same shift that we had on our clean water side of the business that time ago. And look at where we are today. In the majority of our communities, they have uninterrupted supplies of water 24/7. Even in hot summers like 2025, it's a resource that comes out of your tap for a very low price, really.
And actually innovation played a big part, didn't it, in getting us from, we used to turn customers off when I've joined the sector for 24 hours sometimes to line pipes, and it was never great, but that was the way things were done. And now you measure it in minutes lost rather than hours. And a huge part of that was driven by innovation, and it will be interesting to see the role that that plays in reducing spills from across the sewerage network. How loudly, I suppose, are some of the challenges that we hear over the Sunday dinner table or when you're out with your mates? How loudly do you think they're being heard within the sector?
Loud and clear. Everybody has got absolute clarity in terms of like what their expectation is. A lot of the water companies under kind of investigation from Ofwat, leading to enforcement action for some, including Anglian Water. That is serious stuff. But, you know, notwithstanding our economic regulator telling us that we must do better, there is passion within communities. A lot of people that work at Anglian Water drink Anglian water and use Anglian water recycling systems. When you wear the Anglian Water badge or you drive around in the Anglian Water van, people know who you work for and people want to be hugely proud. That's, you know, part of engagement, that's part of coming to work, to be proud of what you do. In my role at Anglian Water, you know, around spills reduction, kind of helping keep flow in the pipe and not out of the pipe, I couldn't ask for more in terms of, you know, the support that is there from the bottom of our organisation to the top of our organisation, including the board. Everybody has got a laser focus on it.
As a global consultancy with extensive technical and advisory expertise, Arup works across the entire water cycle, with utilities, local and regional governments, commercial and domestic water users and partners. From designing and maintaining key water infrastructure services to advising on natural catchments and flood defences, Arup helps its clients consider long-term economic, environmental and social dimensions. Arup, like Planet Possible, is focused on making progress for our climate, water and nature. BMA is a next-gen AI decision intelligence software company. Their cloud-based platform, Decisio, redefines how water and energy companies approach their infrastructure planning to make better, faster and more connected critical decisions, simultaneously achieving net zero, resilience and financial sustainability. So you've touched a little bit on Anglian and you talked there about the enforcement. Tell us a little bit about what's happening at Anglian Water and your role and how that links to some of the stuff that people might have seen in the programme.
There are 6 regulatory flow compliance measures, of which sort of storm overflows and spills and dry day spills are 2 key measures of. And that's really the stuff that gets talked about in the press. There are 4 other measures that sit behind it around how much flow that we can treat, how much flow are we passing through our system, whether we're using like pressure release valves, so emergency overflows, whether we're using them appropriately. I am accountable for the performance of those measures here at Anglian Water. And we have got a dedicated flow compliance team. So it formed in June last year, and they are, you know, ultimately responsible and accountable for driving performance in that, improving our instrumentation that tells us how our assets are performing, and also driving innovation. On the back of the Ofwat investigation into like flow compliance performance, Anglian Water agreed to undertakings with Ofwat, and they're doing some great stuff on the back of it. So we've created a community fund, which is £5.8 million, which we'll be investing back in our communities who've been impacted by flooding or excess flow related issues, which is fantastic. With our capital enhancements or our WINEP obligations, we're accelerating 30% of those, so they will deliver much more quickly than was originally planned.
And WINEP is the Water Industry National Environment Programme, just for anyone that's not heard of WINEP, yeah?
That is where our sort of like capital enhancement money goes, like new cool stuff. We've accelerated the WINEP obligations, and we are investing an additional £57 million worth of shareholder money into the organisation to remove, address, attenuate excess flow across our catchments. And that is a significant investment above and beyond, you know, the plans that we originally had, which were pretty significant anyway, around, you know, £1 billion worth of investment And the final part of our sort of undertakings is about our road to longer term compliance, and how do we have a system, assets, ways of working that mean that we've got a reliably compliant asset base that has got the capability to tell us when maybe it's feeling a little bit poorly or something's about to go awry, and we build that capability to sort of proactively respond to potential non-compliance and get ahead of the curve, rather than where we are a little bit today, which is about reactively responding to the non-compliance when it happens. That, I think, will be sort of like the major shifts. That's where we find ourselves sort of on the back of the undertakings. And there's a team of people here at Anglian whose jobs are to, get under the skin of knotty problems, sort out those chronic and persistent issues, and to drive the capital investment in the right places to make sure that it's making a material difference.
One of the things that I thought was really interesting, I guess, in the programme and more generally, is that shift between what are water companies legally permitted to do, but that the public probably think is unacceptable. I think we would think that is unacceptable too. And then what is illegal behaviour? And in some respects, I don't know about for you, Lizzie, but for me, that's all kind of got mixed up together. The word dumping of sewage is the one thing that frustrates me, because it's a verb that suggests that somebody's pressing a button and saying off you pop. And I mean, that's not the reality from my perspective. It might be interesting just to explore a little bit around what standards do we have at the moment, and where are you driving your team towards? What are you trying to achieve? What could the public expect? You talk there about we're driving towards compliance. Some people might say, does that mean you're not compliant at the moment, and what does that look like? So just would you help unpick that a little bit for me, because I think that's a really interesting part of this whole debate.
Maybe the way to give a good analogy is, we were talking, weren't we, earlier about on the clean water side of the business, like interruptions to supply, and how there's a regulatory measure, fairly complicated, but in terms of that measures the amount of seconds and minutes that customers are going without water for. But fundamentally, the expectation is customers never go without, they're never off supply. If you then translate that into the flow world, let me take, for example, flow to full treatment. So that's one regulatory measure. What it measures is our sewage treatment works. They're designed to deal with a certain capacity, certain volume of water or flow at peak times. Now, there is a regulatory measure around that, about, I get these numbers the wrong way around, like 92%, 95% of the time, or vice versa. And that's our permit. That's what we're permitted. That's what our assets are expected. But actually, internally, what we're focusing on, I guess, is more aligned to the urban wastewater treatment regulations, which is around, actually, we should be flow to full treatment compliant 100% of the time. We are focused more on being flow to full treatment compliant 100% of the time, using our emergency overflows genuinely only in an emergency overflow situation, and they're not sort of like pseudo storm overflows. So actually, we're trying to do the right thing above and beyond our permits in terms of compliance with that urban wastewater element of it.
And I guess if I was being really challenging, do you think you're doing enough? Is it fast enough? Is it thorough enough given what the public want?
I would have it all yesterday, right, if I could have it. When I look at, are we training our people to be able to spot potential non-compliance and to be able to deal with those problems? Yeah, I think absolutely. Certainly here at Anglian is going full ball in terms of making sure everybody's really clear in terms of what good looks like and what their role is to play in that. Where are we in terms of being able to fix problems? If I could have a magic wand, that would be my wish. Overnight, we could pull all of our asset base into the 22nd century and it would be fit for the future and all singing and dancing telemetry on it, and it can proactively tell us when it's about to have a problem, and we were able to respond to that in a slick and consistent way. Clearly, we've got a journey to go on to be able to take our people, our processes, our assets there, and the responsibility that we hold is about spending our money wisely. So where can we make the most difference to the environment, to our customers, to our communities, and invest that there? And innovation is absolutely alive in this sort of wastewater space at the moment. There's so much good stuff going on, and I think we will see more and more. The good thing that I see is like a willingness to learn across the sector. So different companies have really different strategies being taken to tackle spills and issues with flow compliance. We're learning from each other in terms of what's your strategy delivered that might be of advantage to us and vice versa? And I see that formally and informally happening reasonably successfully, actually, which is reassuring and good, and also makes my life easier because somebody else is trying it out and, you know, going down the bunny hole, so I don't have to. I'm going down a different set.
MWH Treatment is one of the UK's leading water and wastewater process contractors. MWH offers a truly integrated design and build service that's uniquely dedicated to the water industry. With an innovative and future-facing approach, everything MWH does is guided by its purpose to shape a better world. So you answered my magic wand question beautifully without me even asking it. So that means I'm going to ask you one cheeky final question in that case then, because we know what you do with the magic wand. And I suppose, given that we're reflecting on a programme that the general public have watched, if listeners are not water and environment professionals, not in this space, maybe not that close to it, what's the one thing, following on from our conversation, I suppose, and from what you know, that you would want them to take away on the back of watching the programme, but then also your experience? What's the one takeaway for those listeners, do you think?
I would want to know our customers and communities to know that the people that work at water companies are good people, and that fundamentally we care. And with the resources that we've got in the regulatory environment that we work in, we are all doing our very best each and every day and every minute of every day to make sure that we are spending money, investing, looking after our people, looking after them as best possible, and that we don't always get it right, but we're trying really hard to not get it wrong. That would be my takeaway.
Thank you, Lizzie. Thanks so much for joining us, and thanks for your authenticity, really. It's much appreciated, because it's a tricky watch, tricky topic, and I'm grateful that you took the time to come and talk to us. As ever, time has flown by, and here we are at the end of this episode of Planet Possible. Thank you for joining us. I hope you found the conversation insightful. I hope it's given you something to think about in your world. And if you don't already, then subscribe to Planet Possible on your podcast app, and we will magically appear in your feed. We've got more fantastic guests and topics lined up for the rest of this year, and so I hope you'll join us for those, including next Thursday's episode. So all that leaves me to say is a huge thank you to our sponsors, BMA, Arup and MWH Treatment, and my excellent guest, Lizzie Frost. Thank you, Lizzie.
Thanks, Niki. Take care.
That's it, everyone. Stay curious, stay connected, and we'll see you next time.